What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning into this week's Weekly Wash. The Weekly Wash is our opportunity to come together once a week and remember that we are still here. WASH is an acronym. We are still here. And sometimes it feels like the world is changing too fast. And sometimes it feels like everybody hates each other and everybody disagrees and is debating all the time about stupid, frivolous shit. But it doesn't need to be that way. We Are Still Here is a washover. It's a bit of a cure. It's my opportunity to do some curing, some curation of positive news out there in the zeitgeist. So I come each week to bring you at least 5 stories, sometimes a poem. This week is our very first experiment with the Weekly Wash, or my first experiment with the Weekly Wash. And so we try to keep these under 5 minutes, and we report 5 things that are positive that are happening in the world today, and maybe a poem or a song or something like that. Curate something positive because, to be honest, there is a need for more hope in this world. Hope gets a bad reputation by some people that say that if you don't act to make the world better and if you solely rely on hope, then you're a sucker, because you can't just expect for life to get better unless you do the work. So, but if you are allowing the dread and worry about some of the negative, destructive forces in this world to get to you, then that's not good either, because some people just give up. Some people become incredibly apathetic, or just, they just resign their attention altogether. And the world remains a pretty beautiful place for all of us. It's our home, and it comes with a billions of different life forms out there in all kinds of different styles and curations. So for us to get hung up on one particular subject of disagreement seems kind of silly. So there's my disclaimer for the Weekly Wash. We are still here. This is a curation, and so here's a few things to be grateful for. In Australia, the bars and restaurants that closed down during the pandemic had all of this excess beer. So instead of dumping it out, they took some expired brews and they were sent to a water treatment plant. Millions of liters of unused beer were sent to the Glenlegg wastewater treatment plant to be converted into a renewable energy source. The plant mixed organic industrial waste with sewage sludge to produce biogas, which is then turned into an electricity to power the whole facility. It generally generates enough biogas to provide about 80% of its energy needs. But the recent influx of beer has boosted its energy generation to new levels, reaching 654 megawatt hours in a single month. The senior manager of production and treatment of SA Water said in a statement, by adding around 150,000 liters of expired beer per week, generated a record 355,200 cubic meters of biogas in May, and another 320,000 cubic meters of June, which is enough to power 1,200 houses in Australia. Wow. Take your leftover beer and you power houses. Beer worked wells for the plant's digesters, referring to the large sealed concrete tanks where sewage sludge is heated in an oxygen-free environment and decomposed to produce methane-rich biogas. The booze's high caloric value, the amount of heat released during combustion, makes it perfect for the anaerobic digestion process, she said. So that's one example. That's number one. Number two is that during this whole kind of cocoon, I call it the chrysalis phase of our species, this whole shelter-in-place situation, 67% of people are more hopeful now than when the pandemic began. And here's the point. 75% plan to support small businesses as much as possible once restrictions on non-essential businesses are lifted in their areas. People are starting to recognize and not take for granted the value of the people in their community that are providing goods and services to them. So that's awesome. That 75% of people that were polled, and I don't know what the sample size is, but still just the same. We need to stop feeding Amazon. We need to stop feeding the beast, because there's people out there that are growing and building their own things. So let's start supporting our neighbors and the people in our community, and because their health is our health too. So support small businesses, and I'm delighted to see that people are taking that stuff into consideration. Number 3, we are almost a quarter way through the 21st century, and science has made a massive breakthrough. So what's this massive breakthrough? Well, is it hoverboards, time travel, instant pizza? Not quite. In a newly published study, scientists in Botswana have discovered that painting eyes on the rear ends of cattle might just be the future for predator prevention in the region. Painting eyes on the butts of cows prevents them from being eaten by lions. It scares away the lions because the lions see this big face, which is the ass of a cow. The 4-year study determined that painting fake eyes on the butts of cattle could be the future of Botswana farmers, with the tactic proving to be a surprisingly effective way to scare off cow-hungry animal assailants. Animal ass assailants. These animals are massive predators too. Think the big cats of Africa, lions, leopards, cheetahs, hyenas, all scared by some fake, and no offense, not all that convincing eyes. So, number 4 is a story from the Dutch people. Number 4 is a story from the Dutchland, the Dutch city of Utrecht. Utrecht? I'll put it right here. The city is Utrecht. Has turned more than 300 of its bus stops into shelters for bees. They've turned bus stops into bee stops. These bee stops now have green roofs planted mainly with sedum, a drought-resistant plant favored by pollinators, which also captures dust and rainwater. The new bee-friendly stops are cared for by a team of workers who use all electric vehicles. Up to 316 bus stops have recently been transformed into little bee sanctuaries. These bee sanctuaries are essentially standard bus stops with grass and wildflowers planted on the top of the roofs to encourage pollination. Not only do bee stops support the city's biodiversity by attracting honeybees and bumblebees, they also help capture fine dust and store rainwater. Because the roofs are mainly composed of sedum plants, which are a favorite among pollinators, they require very little water to survive. So again, innovative humans work in that whole multi-purpose, dual-purpose function, and taking regular old bus stops that people sit at when they need to get someplace and turning them into bee sanctuaries that capture rainwater. So they serve 3 functions. I think that's pretty cool. And our last story today, it comes from Iceland, actually, and China, both. 2 12-year-old female beluga whales arrived safely last week at Klettsvik Bay, where they will stay in a bayside care pool for a short period of time to acclimate before being released into the wilder sanctuary. Klettsvik Bay in the Westman Islands off the south coast of Iceland is the world's first open water sanctuary for beluga whales. Once Little Gray and Little White are released, it will mark the first time they have been in the sea since they were taken from a Russian whale research center in 2011. Andy Boole, head of Sea Life Trust, said, "We're absolutely delighted to be able to share the news that Little Gray and Little White are safely in their sea sanctuary care pools and are just one step away from being released into the wider open water home." Following extensive planning and rehearsals, the first stage of their release back to the ocean was as smooth as we could have hoped and planned for. We are carefully monitoring Little Gray and Little White with our expert care team and veterinarians and hope to announce their final release back to the ocean very soon. So the thing with that is we need to remember to count the little victories. In the Tibetan Shambhala warrior code, they talk about Drala. Drala is the same as magic, and it's paying attention to the little finer details in life, the little tiny things, the morsels, the little tiny bits of pollen on the stamens of the flowers. This is where the true magic is, if we can align our focus on the tiny things. And So these 2 whales that were, in these scientific research facilities in Russia, now they're going to be released back into the ocean. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So thanks for checking out this week's Weekly Wash. It is my intention every week to bring 5 new positive news stories to the world, because while there are problems that we need to solve, we need to stay sane, we need to stay healthy, and we need to remember that there's still a lot of good. It just doesn't get reported because it's not as controversial and dramatic, right? But the world is a really positive place. It's our Earth, and we got to do what we can to keep hope alive and keep reminding each other about the goodness that's out there, as well as all of the problems, and applying our brilliance towards solving the problems. I'm Zachary Wolk. You can catch me on Instagram at Optimisto. I also have a website, which is zax.zone, and I'll be putting all the links in the description. Shout out to Shady Pines Radio, shadypinesradio.com. Lots of big stuff happening on that front as well. Homegrown, community-spun radio station. It's really cool. So everyone should listen to Shady Pines Radio 24/7, independent community radio station right here out of Portland, Oregon. And I wish I had a sponsor for this one, but check in next week. And thank you so much for tuning in to this first episode of the Weekly Wash. We are still here. Peace.